Welcome back to Endless Tangents. I'm your host, Zamb1esaurus, and this is my co-host, Twiggles. How are you doing, Twiggles?
I'm doing great. It's a fantastic time. How are you, man?
I am feeling good. I just had a session at the pool, and
Nice.
we've talked about goals and stuff, and so I was actually able to swim laps from one end to the other, not
Amazing.
consecutively, but yeah. So I'm feeling good about it.
Interesting, because my son we might look to admit him into checking out some competitive swimming, and that was one of the requirements. He needs to be able to swim 2 laps. I'm not sure if he could do it. We've never tested it, but we'll find out.
It
So,
is not easy when you
yeah,
don't know how to swim.
exactly.
So,
Awesome. Good job, though.
yeah, thank you. So for this episode today, we're actually going to talk about essentially the main driver of why we created the podcast in the first place, and that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Um, I Zambies have an official diagnosis. I've had it for a couple of years, probably a lot longer. I was diagnosed as an adult. It's been a very up and down life cycle, I guess you could say, after having the diagnosis. It explained a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But, before I, dive deep into that, there's just a lot of different things that people have talked about with ADHD. It's, I almost want to say marginalized, because if you come across as a hyperactive person or an energetic person, maybe with an outgoing personality, they'll say, oh, well, could be just my ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And it's demonized in the media. It's over-diagnosed.
Even possibly over self-diagnosed, like myself, right? So
Yeah.
in your case, you went and got tested. I have been in therapy for many years now. I have talked to my therapist on and off about trying to understand what is the potential for me on the spectrum. Right. We'll get into a little bit of neurodivergence and all the different types of symptoms and things. But for myself, I recently took something through my therapist. I realize it's not through a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so it's not as formal. But the results helped me kind of give me an idea that I could have situational ADHD, which is possibly another thing, right? Where I'm not quite super hyper. There is certain components of it that may come out maybe at the best of times, right? And what has been really interesting to me, to your point, is just the diagnosis of it overall, right? And the more I kind of dug into it and learned about it, a lot of them refer back to symptoms and behaviors from when you were a kid, right? So
Yeah.
it really made me wonder, how accurate could it be? Obviously over the years, the definition of things have been morphing and changing as they're discovering more and learning more, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so very interested to kind of compare some of our notes. And again, like you said, we're not necessarily doctors, we're not psychiatrists, right? But what we can do is talk through some of our experiences. And for me personally, it's been really helpful to be able to identify some of these things, right? And being able to label these things can sometimes be scary, but also can be very liberating, because then I know, hey, I could look this up. I can see, am I conclusively this? Maybe, maybe not. But at least it explains some of these things that I've been living with my whole life, as well as my family and others, so that I can now kind of find other people to relate with and even problem solve together.
Yeah. And coming up with the different strategies to help organize you as a person,
Mm-hmm.
to not shield, but support your areas of deficit. Jumping into ADHD, it's your lack of attention. People say ADHD, it's like a superpower. You can hyper focus, right? But it's actually there's a famous doctor, I think his name is Dr. Russell Barkley, and he talks about what hyper focus is, and it's actually not your ability to focus on a specific topic, but it's your inability to stop focusing on it. And combined with your inability to break your focus, as well as your inability to function, your executive function to work, which is like your ability to organize and plan ahead, plan long-term goals or even short-term and medium-term goals, your ability to do those things is impaired. And when you combine those things, you can have severe ADHD in that respect. And it's not just those things. There's a lot of different symptoms with ADHD, time blindness, emotional dysregulation, and we'll get into some of those. But starting with, I think with executive dysfunctions, one that I think surprisingly people don't talk about a lot, because they talk about the emotional aspect, the hyperfocus, and all the cute things with ADHD. If you've ever watched Malcolm in the Middle, there's a episode where what's the dad's name? I forget his name.
I think it's Hal.
Hal.
Maybe
He comes home from work to tries to turn on a light in his house. It doesn't work. So he unscrews the light bulb. He goes to replace it, tries to open the drawer. The drawer is stuck. So then he goes into the garage and something breaks. He's trying to fix the shelf or something like that. And then
and he has to go try and get into the car, and the car is not quite working, making a funny noise.
And then Lois comes home and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm trying to fix a light bulb."
She's like, "Hey, did you know that the light is out?" And he's like, "What do you think it is I'm doing?" Right? And it's interesting because I never watched Malcolm in the Middle. When you showed it to me, I didn't quite understand. And then it really clicked because, again, self-awareness, right? There's these little things that my loved ones may take for granted, my family may take for granted, but to me, it just seems so normal. I don't even realize I'm doing these things, right?
Yeah.
And as you kind of pointed out, a lot of it is just awareness of what's going on, right? Half the time, I have built up these sort of tactics and strategies because I need to be functional. I need to be able to get these things done. And the other ironic thing is that even in my career, I've realized the importance of being detail-oriented and scheduling and planning. And maybe that's kind of why I overcompensate by trying to put extra attention to it, because I know that if I don't put that rigor around and the structure, I will often find myself going down a random path. And I still do, right?
Yep.
So it's just that innate kind of reaction to needing to be able to survive, right? Especially in this day and age, we have to work, and we have to make money. And if I can't do a good job of those, then, I might be at risk of losing my job.
Yeah. And also being just told like, well, why don't you just do it?
Yeah.
It just, that just does not work with people who have ADHD. You have a low amount of dopamine in your brain. The dopamine is like the motivation. It's a hormone in your brain. And when you have enough, it sparks it's like a gate opening, right? When you have enough, the gate opens and you have the energy, the motivation, the desire to do your task, and you do it. If you don't have that dopamine, there is nothing that is going to get you to do those things that you need to do, which is why, like boring tasks people don't want to do. But if you're a neurotypical person, someone who doesn't have ADHD, you can tell yourself like, hey, like I need to do this. I just
gotta get it done.
Yes. And you can.
I just literally, if it was boring and mundane, I literally just would not be able to do it.
It's
and
like
I realized that.
Scratching a chalkboard, right? Like it's an awful thing to want to do something. I have a severe aversion for some reason to laundry. I really hate doing laundry. I would rather do the dishes, take the garbage out, put the kids to bed, clean the cat box. I will do all of those things. I just really hate doing laundry. I don't know what it is.
So I have something similar. So mine was, and I kept procrastinating and I kept blowing it off. And it was basically oiling my cutting board. So what I researched, and we had a nice cutting board, I realized that it was important to oil it so that it doesn't crack, right? Which was interesting because, my mom and my parents had a cutting board for many, many, many years, and they never oiled it. They never took care of it, right? So I said, why am I even doing this? But when I saw it in my to-do list, I would just get immense dread, and I would just keep postponing it because I just didn't want to do it, and I couldn't figure out why. Right now, and eventually after talking to my therapist and working through this, right, she's like, well, if it's not serving you, then maybe you should just get rid of it. Because if you find yourself procrastinating, then do you even need to do it? And so, you know what? You're right. Forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. So we haven't been oiling it. We've gotten other types of cutting boards, right? We're not buying something that's going to last forever, but
Yeah.
we still take care of it and it seems to be fine. So I hear you on those little things that you just don't want to do. And another
Yeah.
interesting one that I know you pointed out to me was, hey, do you enjoy reading? And I said, no. And you said, are you sure? Maybe it's just because you don't like reading boring things. Because as you
Yes.
know, if it's a game or if it's something interesting, I will hyperfixate and just keep digging through it. And I'm just naturally curious and I want to problem solve and I want to understand, right? Why? Because it's something new. It's something either unsolved or I feel like I have the capability to solve it, you know?
Yeah.
And suddenly it is infinitely more interesting, you know?
It like when the dopamine, when that level gets high enough that the gates open, you actually want to do whatever you want to do. Like it almost feels like you're a different person. Like you're just alive. You're
Yeah.
just full of energy. It feels like you can take over the world essentially, right? You can conquer the world because it just feels so good to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because it's like it only applies to the things you actually want to do and not the
And,
things that are
and
important and can always be important.
sometimes to the detriment
Yeah.
of my own well-being.
Oh, yeah.
Funny story was, as we've talked about goals and goal setting and trying to accomplish things, right? So, between us, we have, some competitions. We're working towards a healthy challenge with our trainer, and it's something that's important. And my goal was to, sleep more every night. But then ironically, we have a little bit of a friendly steps challenge, which sort of interferes. And I have this competitive nature of, well, what do I do? I go to sleep early or do I get more steps in? And last night I chose poorly and I decided to get more steps in and I have sacrificed sleep. So to your point, not always to what I need to be doing or healthy for me, right? But
Yes.
I just needed to get those steps.
And that's also like that kind of flows into like how they talk about ADHD as a superpower versus, is it a liability? And
Hmm.
you'll see some authors talk about how, oh, it's my superpower, I can hyper focus, but it's it it has to have guardrails. You have to create external accountability for yourself in
Hmm.
order to kind of reframe it as a superpower.
I agree.
At the end of the day, your ability to focus on something, hyper focus on it, is because you can't break focus. Like if I am hyper focused on a particular topic or study or work that I am enjoying, I will forget to do anything else. And that
Yeah.
includes like drinking water, going to the bathroom, getting up and moving around. 9:30 a.m. I sit down at work, I'm working. Wow, it's 3 o'clock. I didn't eat lunch. I never drank any water. There's so many things for me to do. I forgot, to do this or run this errand. And in order to turn it into, let's say a superpower, like you know, you have to create your own system, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
alarms or have someone.
What serves you? Agree with you, right? I
Yeah,
think it's important to be able to acknowledge it and realize, like you said, the deficiencies, and ultimately you control your own life and the situations that you're put into. A lot of it is
exactly.
relative and based on not only perspective, but also how you prepare yourself for the situation. If you know that, let's say you were going to have a car race, right? And one of your tires was flat, would you still go? Well, you would know, hey, I should probably fix this tire before I try and race. Otherwise, I'm going to be at a disadvantage. I'm not going to be able to keep up, you know?
Hmm.
And it's being able to identify. That's kind of why I'm so interested in being able to label all these things about myself, right? And I genuinely tried to go find, a proper diagnosis. But as you kind of mentioned, there's also sort of a stigma, right? Of, you know, if I am suddenly diagnosed as this, is that something negative that might happen to me? Is there some sort of, permanent record, especially with kids? We know we're going to try and talk about this with our kids, right? There's one of the most important things for me is to identify these things within myself, because how could I possibly teach and expect things of my kids if I don't even understand it about myself,
Yeah.
right? And there was a lot of different angles that I know we'll go into later that triggered me and really prompted me to discover myself, to be able to understand, how do I parent? Why am I delivering this type of messaging? Is this even intentional?
Yeah.
it's definitely unconscious, right? Like I'm just reacting this way due to emotions, potentially emotional dysregulation and all these things, or maybe just never really understanding how to express and communicate emotions to begin with, right? That goes down a whole nother path. But yeah.
How you grew up as a child has a
Yeah.
huge impact on how you are as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
But when you add, ADHD is just like putting all of that in a mixer and then just mixing the whole thing up and making it even harder to kind of understand, like, is this just me not understanding how my emotions work, or is this ADHD?
That's true.
And with young boys who are, between the two of us, we have we have boys that are very high energy.
Yep.
And there's like a tension between being, you want to be a good parent, you want to be there for them, but you also want to put your foot down where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And being able to balance those things while being a parent and having ADHD is so difficult because, as you said, there's a component of emotional dysregulation. And what I've noticed in myself personally is, the kids are doing something and there's just a baseline of irritation and it's slowly rising,
Yes.
but it's still fine. And then at some point it hits some sort of gate.
It snaps.
And you snap and you're like, stop doing this. Like, what are you doing? But as a parent, then you reflect and you're like, man, like, I didn't tell them at all to stop. So why would they stop?
Correct.
And that's where it comes in a little bit with your self-realization that, like, you need to take a step back and almost have like not a checklist, but like, the best way, I guess the best way is to say is like, self-realization, like, hey, wait a minute, the kids are doing something that I don't like. Let me tell them that. Let's start bringing it down and communicate.
I think one of the important things that I learned from therapy was sort of the emotional thermometer, right? And what I realized with my son was how quickly it escalates. I could detect it. I could notice it, but it was in the snap of a finger, right? Like it instantly went from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And that's what was really difficult for me. And then, of course, I react, right? Whatever patience I had, I then struggled because when you fill a room with so much emotion and energy, right, there's nowhere else for it to go. And it kind of gets directed to me. And then all of a sudden I get defensive. Like, well, what did I do to deserve this? But then I have to remember, like you said, as a parent, you're often tested to be able to see how do you pave the way for your child, right? Is this a natural behavioral response to the situation, or is it because there is something a little bit different, right? And that's the hardest part because, as you said, kids naturally want to test their boundaries, right? Kids naturally need to discover themselves where you will draw that line, right?
Yeah.
And then you will often see there's, obviously multiple different parenting approaches, right? There might be the more gentle parenting. There could be the tiger mom parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And which one really ultimately works the best? Well, obviously a lot of it depends on your own personality as well as your kids, right? But seeing my kids trigger and especially because we both have two boys, right? You would definitely probably see differences between the two of them, right? And one of them gets red hot immediately. And the other one seems to be a little bit cooler. But then also, since they're growing up together, they sort of play off each other as well, right? They start to observe each other. They see each other's reactions and emotions. And they sort of realize, hey, is that something I should test also? Is that something I want to push some buttons on? Right? How come he got away with it? Right? It's always I don't know about you. I know my kid's a little bit older. It's always about what's fair. And of course, my first reaction is always, well, life is not fair, first off, right? But how do you make the best of whatever the situation is? Right? So it's a lot of interesting things that trigger a lot of feelings for me, especially as a parent, right? And you never really know. And that's why it's even more important that we have these conversations and talks, because as we're noticing amongst our friends, I think one of the most interesting things to me, especially learning later on, right? Because again, I didn't realize all these things growing up, especially again, we've talked about when we grew up, these are not really things that we really got diagnosed, right?
Nope.
Like a lot of the teachers probably knew they sensed something, but again, in my family, right, it was, no, that can't be.
Yeah.
That's just not us, you
Oh,
know?
there's a huge cultural stigma. Like,
Absolutely.
I think I think people in America are more supportive of mental health.
But
Um,
in
but
many
in
areas of the
Asian
world,
culture,
yeah, and many other cultures as well.
it's just yeah, the many other cultures, it's just not a thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Asian and Central America, not Central American, what is it, like Middle Eastern,
Hmm.
those areas, um, they just don't really consider
Mental health
mental
as a
health.
whole. Just tell you
Yeah,
to suck
like
it up
forget
and go get it
ADHD.
done. Yeah.
Yes, and it's interesting growing up because when I moved in with my wife, I brought all my old, like I had a file cabinet, I brought all my old stuff. Turns out I had report cards in there from like
Mm,
really a long time ago. And, not throwing things away is definitely a topic for ADHD, but we won't get into that right now. But I had, as an adult, I had my kindergarten and first grade report cards in there. And right at the bottom in the comment section, the teacher wrote like, is lazy, comma, has good potential, comma, uh, you know, maybe potentially diagnosed, for ADHD. Uh,
fascinating.
my parents were like, heck no, there is nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
Turns out that yes, there was something wrong. Um, and so there is a cultural stigma around mental health that's unfortunate, and there are a lot of people who could benefit from getting a diagnosis or at least talking to a therapist about it.
Yeah.
Because, going back to what you had said something earlier, which is, ADHD is more prevalent today. Um, but there are also a lot of conditions that are similar symptoms. With ADHD, there's like inattentiveness. You have your typical like hyper, oh look squirrel type of ADHD, but there's also like inattentive ADHD, and ADHD for women is also diagnosed differently, and I think is less diagnosed than boys, because boys are
Yeah.
typically, they're hyperactive, they might
Seems
have
much
it.
more obvious, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then girls and females can typically hide it or mask it. They
Yes.
have, better control of their emotions. They're able to kind of word their way out of things, right? And make it seem like it's normal. And they're able to mask it better,
Yeah.
you know?
And not, um, you know, going through life wondering like, am I doing the things that I need to do? Or why am I not living up to a potential that my parents set out for me?
Yeah,
It's can be devastating for people.
absolutely. It
And
really challenges you to figure out what direction you want to take. Do
yeah,
you want to just go with it, or do you try to rise up and go beyond it? You know?
yeah. And that's something that you and I have talked about in terms of growth mindset. And that's
Hmm.
one of the reasons why I went for a diagnosis, and also why you did as well, because you wanted
Yeah.
to know, you're curious about it, you want to be better. What am I doing wrong? Well, turns out there is a condition that I have that is making it everything harder for me. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean I'm gonna, use it
Just
as an
give up.
excuse, right?
Yeah. At least now
I'm
you know
gonna
your boundaries, like you said, and your
exactly
limits.
and figure out a way around it and move forward.
Yeah. One of the fascinating things for me, because I remember you actually introduced me to this. I was trying to learn more. I was trying to understand about myself. And you said, hey, go check out this independent film called Disruptors, right? And he said, it
Hmm.
might be great to educate you, teach you a little bit. There were some snippets of it where I think they were trying to put it in a good light, which I think is important, right? Again, remove some of the stigma. It did talk through, the different types of treatment. It showed a bunch of different, famous celebrities and high performing individuals. And like you said, they did talk a little bit about presenting it as a superpower, right? But the one piece that really stuck out to me was when they were going through some of the symptoms. And originally I had watched it in with the intention of kind of working with my wife to understand that, hey, it might be my kids. And then they talk about the symptoms one after another, and it starts dinging in my head, and my wife's kind of laughing at me, is like, that's you. And I said, no way. And then the real kicker was, you do realize that a lot of these symptoms can very well be genetic. And I said, oh man, it's me, and then I
Yep.
started to trace the line and I said, no way, it's my mom,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly it made so many things made so much more sense,
Yeah.
because, we kind of joke about it too. It's like, do you think your mom even knows that she might have this? And again, we've never gotten diagnosed. We've never really dug into it. But the reality is that if she's adverse to being open to these things to begin with, why would she ever sort of try to even pursue the diagnosis for herself? Right?
Exactly.
Even though
Yeah.
she is clearly exhibiting what I feel like many of these symptoms that could help her. But she is older, different generation, like you said, right?
Yeah.
They may not even want to know. But at least now it could help me understand how to react better and realize that sometimes, as we've talked about many times, you can only control what you can control, right?
Yeah.
And I cannot make them want to understand, want them to change, or anything else, right? So the only thing I can do is then change what I can, control around them,
Yeah.
you know?
It's funny that you mentioned the genetic component because my sister, she's been telling me she's like, I want to exercise and I have a
Mm.
treadmill and it has boxes of clothes on it. And I said, okay, take the boxes of clothes off and go exercise, question mark. And she's like, well, no, because I have to take the boxes of clothes. I have to organize it in this closet, but the closet's not ready. So I have to hire a guy to come install the closet. And I can't install the closet because the door doesn't fit right. So I need to go buy a new door.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to all this. And I'm like, but you wanted to exercise. What does the closet door have to do with exercise? And it's like, yeah, there's a giant genetic component with ADHD. And funny enough, there is a component of ADHD genetic with diabetes.
Mm.
And a lot of the things that people tell you to do for ADHD for like to help you are like sleep, exercise, eat healthy. That doesn't mean like low medium protein, like don't eat high carb, less processed. And it turns out like when you have certain kinds of diabetes, it can have similar symptoms like brain fog, tired, exhaust, fatigue, distractibility. And so there's some research now that linking ADHD traits with diabetes, and it's like all of it is connected. The more they research,
fascinating.
Yeah, you find out things are connected together.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like you said, sleep is so critical and so important, right? I know they have not really scientifically diagnosed and connected a lot of these things, but I know I have sleep apnea. I'm sure it has had developmental issues with me, just the way my brain functions and kind of connect some dots, as well as a lot of the other potential and metabolic issues that I have, right? So it's just even more important. It's hard really understanding where does it all start from, Obviously, we are who we are through our experiences and genetics, but really trying to trace where it's almost endless, like you said with your sister. Well, where do I start? Right? There's so many other things that are in the way. I just couldn't possibly do it, right? Because there's there's just too many steps, and it's at that point it starts to really trigger anxiety, and it builds up, and it can be absolutely paralyzing.
And that stuff won't get done for years. Like it can sit for years.
Absolutely. Right.
I've been trying to clean my upstairs in my home out, eBaying one item at a time, and it is taking a long time, and more things accumulate.
It does. It doesn't help when I happen to magically donate things to your house as well.
Well, I mean, that's another thing with ADHD, right? Like you get really interested in something.
Yes.
And it's a hobby, and you decide, I want to do this hobby. I want to learn how to play the guitar. And I get a guitar and I get an amp, and you practice for like a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 or 4. And then the dopamine slowly starts dipping, and you kind of don't get the same rush from doing it again. And then you stop playing it, and then weeks go by, and it's just sitting there.
This may be an ongoing joke with some of our friends in our friend group that laugh about all of the hobbies that we've bought, and how we realize that since we're all very like-minded. We should just share, and we just
Yes.
move the things around so that we all get the benefits of these fun new toys, without the commitment of having to buy it,
Yeah. They're
Might
gonna
as well
call it
share the love.
they call it the ADHD hobby tax.
Yeah.
And you if you hold on to the item long enough, you'll come full circle
Yeah,
and want to
it's
do it all
true.
over again.
Oh, 100%. I got something in the living room, which, yeah, I bought, and in my mind, I was like, oh, I totally need it. I was able to withstand getting it for many years, and then eventually it was on sale, and someone said, you should just get it. So I got it. And yeah, it's just sitting there. But it's coming full circle because, again, like you said, a reason to use it is coming up again. So I'm excited. But yeah.
With all the hobbies and things that I have and you have, and it puts a toll on like not just your own mental health, but obviously like the people around you, your significant
Yes.
other, and the different kinds of symptoms of ADHD. Uh, it can create breakdowns in communication and can very easily build resentment in people if you don't communicate and try to work out what the issue is.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my wife about it when we were early on in our relationship, and she was always upset because I would always leave the cabinet doors open,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't understand why I couldn't just close the door. And I thought it was not a big deal because I am trying to close the door. And she's like, well, why don't you just close it? And I said, well, I don't know. When I push the cabinet door to close and I turn around, and as soon as I turn around, it's literally out of sight, out of mind. And if the door doesn't close, I've already forgotten about it and I've walked out of the kitchen. And so, her communicating that problem to me is a great way to not build that resentment, because it's like, okay, well, I sound terrible in this analogy, but like I can spend the time to close the cabinet door. It's not that I don't want to, then I feel bad because I'm making her upset that
Yeah.
I didn't do something so simple.
It is such an important topic because it does lead back to communication, right?
Yes.
You definitely don't want to build this resentment. I actually was speaking with someone around a similar topic, and they shared their story, which was really heartfelt, and talked about just giving each other grace. Right. Often when we have these symptoms, a lot of it is being self-aware, but then also it's being, aware of it in your loved ones. Right. Like you said, it's not intentional often. So maybe it's not aware. You talk about also object permanence, which I think is fascinating to me because that is a great tactic to use when you want to try and get rid of things, but also works in the same way where it disappears and suddenly it's gone. You don't even realize it,
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, I've read articles talking about how, if you don't communicate and work through these things together, it can absolutely build to resentment, right? If it's important for the other person, then why isn't it important to us? But it is important to us. We just struggle to follow through, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of it was if we don't communicate the things that we would like to happen, how can we have the other person expect to read our mind? Right? That's number one, right? But the number two is, as you said, know that the other person really is genuinely trying, right? Those same exact scenarios. And I, we kind of aligned on this because the same exact topic came up in my household. Hey, you left the drawers open just a little bit. And in my mind, I was like, well, it's because I pushed it and I assumed it closed itself. Right?
Yeah.
Same thing with the closet door, same thing with this door, same thing with these drawers, right? And it's not intentional, but like you said, I'm in such a rush moving on to the next thing that I assume it finished, or maybe in some cases I'll just get to it later, right?
Yeah.
But depending on who you live with and how they are, many people prefer to have a very minimalistic life. Things are tidied up, things are the Marie Kondo method, right, of everything has a place in a home. And that's also a useful tactic that I have found for myself, because if I move things, I will likely lose it. It has to have a specific home. So for things like my wallet, my keys, my watch, my earbuds, that has given me a bit of a nightmare where I can see myself putting something down and literally telling myself, this is a horrible idea. I'm going to turn around and it's going to be gone. Okay. And one of them was my earbuds. They're wireless earbuds. Once you close the box, it cannot detect it anymore. I have to open it for it to be able to see a signal and see my phone. And I threw it on the bed. Horrible idea. And I couldn't find it. And then suddenly in the middle of the night, my wife kicked it around and then we found it. But otherwise, it could have gone missing for who knows how long, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, object permanence is a fascinating thing that I have found for the better or worse of myself.
Yeah. My wife, she always says I always have a box of stuff or a bag of stuff, just random. Like I'll just put things in a box to tidy it up, but then now I have boxes everywhere.
See, but prior to that, I didn't know the magic. I didn't appreciate and understand until someone pointed it out, right? And I said, wow, this really is magical because my desk, I don't know about your desk, I just have this seeming urge to just fill the space with things. You know, if there's an empty spot, I probably have it with a reason. You know, I don't know if you've probably done this yourself, where people will say with certain people, you see a mess, but to that person, they know exactly where everything is because it was intentionally put there.
Organized chaos.
Organized chaos. You know, it bothers other people. You know, someone visited me in the office and was like, wow, you got a lot of stuff on your desk. And I was like, I sure do. Right. And, you know, I just recently cleaned it, but now it's messy again, you know? So how do I get through this? And one of those tips was to create this magical box of stuff. You know, my wife got upset and she said, you got too much stuff that's just everywhere. I kept leaving it on the living room table, right? Because we kind of sit and eat around the certain table. We each have our seats. And I was like, well, if I just leave the stuff in my seat, when I go to sit and eat, if I have 2 minutes, I will process and do whatever I have to do. Surprise, I always deprioritize and I don't do it. So that pile just grows and grows to the point where it's been sitting there for a week, 2 weeks, and longer, and it just disappears. And I was like, oh, cool, it's taken care of. When in reality, it's either in the trash or somewhere else, right? So to your point, all those things ended up into a box. And my wife said, hey, this is your box of stuff. Do whatever you got to do with it. If you need it, it's in this box. And then we slowly, so the tactic for me is to sit down, and I've asked her, I said, hey, I know you really want me to help clean my desk. You just got to sit here with me and keep me accountable. And that's one of the most helpful tips that I've found for myself, right? For work, I have found some very like-minded people at home, even showing with my kids, right? I think it's been a very great strategy for me, and it's been helping me. But like you said earlier, it really depends on, you know, how you handle things and what works best for you, you know?
Yeah. The Dr. Barkley talks about that a lot, and that's external accountability, because you have trouble as a neurodivergent ADHD being able to keep yourself accountable, and having someone in the room with you, if you're at work, having an office shared, if you're remote, having a video call, just working with someone on video. You don't even have to talk to each other, but just feels like you're in the same room together. That can really push you to be better, because it's almost like your brain is like, well, I should be doing something. There's someone else in the room, and it bumps up your dopamine levels, and you're able to get the stuff done that you might not normally want to.
Yeah.
And it's a really useful tactic in the corporate world, and in the tech industry. They'll pair program, or they'll all be on a call together, because you share knowledge, but also when you're, as we said, when you're in another room with someone, or you're in a call with someone, it's like body doubling. It forces you to do
feel
things
more accountable. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think what's the good and bad of it is, the interesting thing that I learned was really discovering as we became adults, and I know you got diagnosed later in life, right? Was just the affinity of like-minded people. How did we gravitate towards each other? And then all of a sudden you start to realize, hey, a lot of my friends are just like me, you know, and we all get along, because part of it is almost, that's just how we think, right? And you're able to think quickly. You're able to string along those tangents and stay connected. And now one of the downsides of having an accountability buddy that might be very much like you is the result of our endless tangents. Right?
Yeah.
Which can be bad, but I think the good thing is we're both, again, aware enough, or we get help and we've, really worked through, kind of, cognitive behavioral therapy. I think that's the main thing that we've been trying to do. I think both of us really focused on sort of natural ways of handling things. We want to be able to still be in control, but also understand that with some people that might just struggle more, right? They may just
Yeah.
need a little bit of help, to be able to get things done.
Yeah. And with ADHD, obviously there's a lot of discussion about medication. And I when I got diagnosed, it was through a provider who was able to prescribe medication. And
Hmm.
I was very hesitant at first.
Yeah.
I guess the best way you can describe ADHD medication. So one of the things about ADHD for me is that when I'm distracted, it's almost like a normal person has a stream of conscious thoughts, right? They can turn it on and off. But for me, it's like imagine having 5 TVs on in your head. They're all at full volume and you can't turn them off. You have to listen to all of them at the same time. That makes things really complicated. And so one of the things with the medication is that it helps, not necessarily, it sounds weird to say calm the voices, but it does calm your excitability down, your brain down a bit. And I tried a number of different medications, stimulant based and non-stimulant, but unfortunately for me, they just have a lot of side effects.
Yeah.
And in combination with all the other ailments that I have, it just didn't make sense for me to continue taking them.
Hmm.
But there are medications that can work for
Different
a number of
individuals.
people and
Yeah.
can be very, very good, very successful for them. But there's a stigma about it because a lot of people who don't have ADHD use and abuse Adderall.
Hmm.
It's very prevalent in colleges and Wall Street and that kind of
So
stuff.
all a lot of the gaming tournaments and
Mm.
professionals I know in those scenes, right? They
Yeah.
they want any advantage they can possibly get, so can be to the detriment of things. But I
Yeah.
agree. At least for me personally, I have not decided to pursue medication just because, like you said, I have also many other ailments that I'm dealing with, and some of them just may not play nice. And also the fact that, as you said, there are many different types, right? And after watching, I think Disruptors, it was talking about how you just got to try. It's almost trial and error. You don't know how you're going to react until you just try it, you know.
Yeah.
Which takes time, takes money, takes resources, and I'm hoping to try and better understand just myself to be able to, see what I can do, right, and see how I can make a change.
Yes. Dr. Barkley also talks about a lot about what are the things you can do for ADHD, and the top 5 things are always like you need a schedule, you need a consistent routine, you
Yeah,
need to exercise, because exercise, not just the cardiovascular or strength benefits, but just all the metabolic changes in your brain, the hormones it influences, it helps. And eating healthier. Like no matter how many things that we discuss, different ailments, different things that happen, like those are some of the things. Eating healthy, exercising, and sleeping are going to come up a lot because it's
control so
essentially your
much.
fundamentals, and they'll
Yeah,
help you quite a bit. But with ADHD, it's extra important because when you exercise, it releases dopamine, it releases different hormones that make you feel good. And I have found that before getting on a meeting or something I need to do, maybe I just, bust out like 10 or 20 squats or get up
hmm,
and walk around, stretch,
yeah.
get some movement in, because it can actually change how you perceive the next meeting that you're, going into, or whatever your next task is.
Yeah, I think something great for work if it's feasible and if possible, right?
Yeah.
I've been trying to include more walking meetings. If it's just a catch up, if it's something where it's a one-on-one session or whatever, more and more I've been noticing colleagues are not only willing but also interested. they too realize that, hey, we're sitting at the desk for so long. Sitting is just generally unhealthy for us, right? Your body was not really meant to. Your body is incredibly intelligent and will adapt to whatever situation you put it in, right? And if you sit for a really long time, your body will and brain will get really good at sitting, not so much moving and doing anything else. I think one of the important things that you mentioned that I thought was really interesting, especially with my son, is creating schedules and keeping track of time.
Yep.
The one scenario, the example was when my son's friend came over and, he was upset after the friend left. I said, well, what happened? He's like, my friend didn't really play with me. I was like, what do you mean? He was here like the whole day. He's like, yeah, well, he was kind of, kept doing his own thing and kept wanting to play his own stuff. So, okay, well, you can't make him, play and do the certain things that you want to do. Right. But,
Yeah.
he was also here like almost the whole day. I'm confused. Like, how long was it? He's like, oh, well, it was pretty much, he came in and he was doing some stuff and then, it was lunch and, that was it. And I'm like, but in between that was like 6 hours of time, and then I realized that they had done a lot of things. It's just in his mind, he had almost no perception of time.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I think that the biggest thing for me, especially when we hyperfocus, is the loss of sense of time, right?
Yep.
I'll ask my son, it's like, hey, how long do you think that was? 5 minutes. No, that was actually an hour.
Yeah.
It's how it's fascinating for me, right? So one of the strategies I try and apply for my steps, right, is if I can play a game while I'm getting steps, right, suddenly I'm not actually even thinking about the steps. The steps just happen to just come naturally and I'm just moving,
Yeah.
all pain is gone, all concept of time is gone, which also could be bad. Right. There have been times where I just got so ingrained in a game or playing something that I just want to solve these things and beat it. All of a sudden, an hour passes by, which is great because I got steps for an hour. I ended up walking from, miles, but not great if I needed to, let's say, go pick up my kids.
Yeah.
So
Time blindness is it's a difficult topic because it's so damaging for someone with ADHD, and you need that's where like the accountability, the routine, the system really shines, because without it, like, man, you're in for a world of hurt. You'll be, late to wake up, late to work, miss things entirely, forget your appointments, because they just it's like not just time blindness, but combined with that object permanence, you just forget.
And then combined with the dopamine rush of you almost put yourself in that situation. Why do we procrastinate?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's so much more interesting and exciting if there's something on the line.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start to realize, oh, I got like 5 more minutes and whoops, now I'm late. Right. Or, something I realize that I'm trying to show and explain to my sons is it's so important to be able to understand your own capability. Obviously, we both have many more years of experience of having probably gone through a lot of times of being late, right? Where we could start to measure and understand, hey, this should roughly take this much time. But when it's really something unknown or, uncharted territories, you might absolutely be incorrect in your judgment. And especially with my kids, they overestimate what they think they can do. And I'm like, there is no way. Now you're just bordering. You just don't want to do it. And it's hard because as a kid, who would want to eat their vegetables? Who wants to do their homework? It's not fun. I would much rather be playing games and things, right? But it's critical as a parent, as a good parent, to teach our kids that they have to go through these struggles, right?
Yeah.
Part of it is if you don't really struggle, are you really growing? Are you really learning? I mean, if it's easy, right? How much are you learning? So that's always also, a catch-22 with parenting. How much do you subject? How much do you put them through the hardships? But that's honestly probably how we turned out the way that we did, right? You have to fight and realize that, do you really want these things? And without that type of pressure to turn into, something, into this gem, right? If you have life too easy, if you get everything your way, there's also almost no reason for you to change.
Exactly. It's funny when you mention like the estimation of time, because my kids are younger, so they don't understand time yet. And
no
when
concept.
they take baths, they're like, we'll set a timer for them. So like
Yeah.
after they bathe, they can play a little bit in the water. And my son will be like, well, set an 81-minute timer
81
because
minute.
he's learning numbers and stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, sure. And I'll just set like a 1-minute timer and it goes off. He's like, oh, okay, I get out. He has no idea what 1 minute or 81 minutes is. It's great.
That's
But once he
hysterical.
figures that out, it'll be a world of hurt.
Yeah, we also had something similar where either showers were way too short or way too long, right?
Yeah.
So what we started to do was, and we only did this for a little bit, but we found certain songs that they enjoyed, right? I say, hey, look, okay, you're getting to the age where you really should be showering by yourself and taking care of things yourself. We're no longer supposed to be helping you, especially I think in America, I think even the kindergarten teachers mentioned it. It's like, hey, you shouldn't be with your parents anymore, right? Especially if
Mm.
they're of different gender, right? So by like 5, it's like, well, I hope you learned. This is how you take care of this. This is how you do that, right? You got to start doing things on your own. And, for shower time, we would play music, certain songs, right? And that would help tell them, hey, okay, well, again, these are strategies that we learned from some parenting group, right? Where this first song is a minute and a half. Go and wash your hair for this minute and a half. As soon as the song ends, this is the rest of your body. Then you got to dry. Then you got to change and all these other things, right? And
Yeah.
it's just to help, like you said, create these triggers because you hear the end of the song. Oh, I know it's coming. It's time to go move on to this next thing,
Yeah.
right? And even with all my plethora of alarms, my wife kind of laughs at me. She's like, why do you have alarms for everything? Well, if I don't, I have alarm backups for my alarms, right? Because I'm like, well, yeah, it's not really time to go to bed. It's just a suggestion,
Yeah.
So
It drives me nuts because now, like now having learned all these things, we have a schedule, we have a routine. The kids generally follow it. When I visit my family,
mm,
they can't even
out the
spell the
door.
word routine. Like my younger son goes to bed by like 6:30. My older son goes to bed generally by 7:30, 8:00. My family doesn't eat dinner until like 7:30. And we're like
Yeah.
sitting there, they're cooking at 6:30. The younger one is literally like loopy and delirious out of his
Yeah.
mind. And
And
it
you're going to
it
pay the price for multiple days because of that essentially that enforced or the intentional jet lag,
yes, the lack of sleep. And that's another big thing with ADHD. I think there was also some research that talked about how circadian rhythm disorders can also be linked with ADHD.
Mm.
I don't know if there's like a correlation or a causation there, but there was definitely something. And with ADHD, it's like, okay, I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. I'm going to lie down in bed. And then it's like, well, what
But
about all these 50 different things that we didn't do or talk about or think about or play or whatever?
But you absolutely couldn't actually just go to sleep.
Yeah, no, you lie down and it's all of a sudden like, well, I could probably go on a run right now. That's how much energy sometimes you have when you lie down because your brain is just absolutely wired.
Yes.
And,
Getting into
and
that sleep topic, yeah, that was one of the suggestions that my wife had pointed out to me, that my mind is almost overstimulated
yeah,
and my body is not keeping up. So one of the best ways to try and counteract that is to just be so physically tired. So go run around a lot, go burn off all that energy, do some strength training exercise until you are physically exhausted, and then watch how well you sleep. But
yeah,
to your point, it goes back to, do I really want to go exercise? Because the brain is incredibly powerful. It is very convincing that, oh, I deserve to just sit here, right? And then all of a
yeah,
sudden, this is why one of the most difficult things for me that our trainer has told us and told me specifically is consistency over intensity. I hear it. I repeat it to myself almost every single day. Yet if you look at my steps charts, if you look at my strength training, my routines and all these different things, it's 100% intensity because I go all out and do it, even to the detriment of myself, sometimes injuring myself, right?
yep,
It's so hard to be consistent,
yeah.
but it's so critically important, right? Every little bit is so important to building up those habits and those routines, but it seems like such a struggle to me specifically. And I'm sure it sounds like you and others.
Everyone struggles with consistency, and one of the things that you'll read about a lot is to set a goal, and specifically a goal that if you're in the corporate world, they have SMART goals,
Yeah.
which are what are they? I forget what the S is, but they're measurable, they're
Yeah.
time bound,
Timely. Yeah.
you can assess it. And there's I forgot what the S is already, but
Yeah, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound.
yeah.
Yeah.
And setting a goal like that can really bump up the dopamine for a person with ADHD. Not and when they say specific, you can make a small goal, like I want to go to sleep at 10:30 every night for a week, or even something even smaller, like I would like to eat, a vegetable once a week.
Or drink enough water,
Yeah.
or get some steps in, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Something really small. And if you're not able to accomplish it, consider whether or not that goal was too vague. Like, eating vegetables once a week is kind of vague, actually. Maybe the goal should be I need to make a salad on Sunday and eat that for lunch.
Yeah.
So, having goals and on shorter deadlines can boost the dopamine for someone with ADHD and really like get them to do whatever they need to get done. And something that we haven't talked about is if and when you accomplish that goal, that feeling of satisfaction that you get from it is something that you really need to internalize, because it will help you remember once you can internalize and form a habit, your brain will be like, hey, remember when we did this one thing and we really felt good about ourselves? Because with ADHD, it's really easy to beat yourself up for not accomplishing a goal and then saying, well, I'm trying so hard, I can't do it. Something is wrong with me. And it's really easy to spiral downwards with that kind of thinking.
It's really interesting to the concept of motivation and intrinsic drive and all these things, right?
Yeah.
That was something I recently discussed with therapy, and even just trying to discover more about myself, right? Is it really from me not trying hard enough, or is it that it's something else that is triggering where I'm just not getting the either emotional support that I need, So it's really important to be aware of just all the things that are going on in life, right? And slowly chip away at the individual pieces and communicate, talk to loved ones, share your story with others. I realize it's often very difficult to open up, right? Especially publicly like we are now. But we realize that, like you said, both of us are trying to grow. We're trying to be better, mainly for ourselves, also for our kids, and just being a good role model for others.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot out there probably already. There's also a lot of, kind of conflicting evidence and things. So all we could really speak to is our personal experiences and just seeing what is working out for us and just trying to share and see if it helps others,
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much information. I mean, in this day and age, there's so much information, and now you have AI, telling you things. And it's important to really write down, like, what do I want? What do I want to accomplish? And then also to kind of, it's not something we talked about, but with all of modern tech and stuff, it's important to just like not use tech and go touch grass, essentially. Go walk around outside.
I mean, isn't that the literal intention of social media and all of these YouTube shorts and TikTok? I mean, it's literally to almost exploit your attention span. Right? I know people that have actively told me, hey, I could physically feel my attention span disappearing. And imagine if we were already at a negative starting point, right? But we were already struggling with these things, which is why it feels so incredibly addicting, which is why, to preserve my sleep, I try to ban YouTube shorts and these other short form content, but you can't really completely get rid of it. I mean, I could get rid of YouTube, but then I find a lot of benefit from YouTube also, either entertainment or learning and all these different things, right? So how do you balance? I mean, that's really a tough part. But
there's ADHD is a topic that we can just keep going on and on about.
There's going to be lots of
so
to
much
be
stuff.
Continued.
Yeah,
absolutely.
With that being said, I think normally we finish our topic and then we move into our rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Twiggles, would you like to go ahead with your rabbit hole?
Absolutely.
What grabbed your attention this week and couldn't let it go?
What grabbed my attention was kind of riffing off of some of our other past topics, which is hobbies, right? And, kind of friendships and community. Something that I've always been interested in was collecting cardboard cards, that of Magic the Gathering, right? I recently got reintroduced to this with some friends, but of course, as we were growing up, collected these collectible card games are often expensive. It's not something that is just readily available, especially if you don't have disposable income, right? So I was very
Yeah.
fortunate to have an older sibling that could help pay for some of these things and allow me to play. So I was very fortunate. But now that I'm an adult, I kind of want to get my kids into some of this. So the fascinating thing about Magic the Gathering is, for those that don't know, it's a fantasy type kind of card game. You typically battle one against each other. You know, you build a deck and you play against each other, and you see who wins, right? Um, but the interesting thing, they've started going the route of Fortnite, where they really focus on collaborations, right? So they started working
Hmm.
with many different intellectual properties. Namely, the one that really got me kind of back in and interested was Final Fantasy. I love the series. I love the games. Growing up, played them all, right? And it's the Magic the Gathering card system and game engine, but with Final Fantasy cards and characters, right? So that was really one of the big booms. And suddenly a huge influx of people came back to start playing. You know, I started playing with a few of my friends. One of the recent ones that is just coming out is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They've done, you know, the Avatar cartoon. They've done Spider-Man. You've done a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
They're really finding a way to get new people in and get a little addicted. So I do have to draw that line in the sand to make sure I don't go overboard. But yeah, it's been really interesting checking it out, learning about what the cards coming out, how to build decks, you know, things that we can just buy and teach the kids. But that's kind of been my rabbit hole lately.
Yeah, my rabbit hole has not been as fun, but my main one was cameras, and not like digital cameras or anything, but like um security cameras. And
Yeah.
it started because I have a 3D printer, which is another ADHD hobby tax that
Mm,
I bought in
me too.
COVID, didn't use for 3 years, and then started using it last month, and then it broke. But
After
that's
I got mine, but yeah.
but I have a camera facing the printer to see, you know, if something messes up. And I started thinking, oh, like, you know, as my kids are getting older, like, I don't have to be in the same room as them, but I also don't trust them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what if I put a camera in the living room, just so I can watch them if I'm like working, you know, let them have
Hmm.
more freedom to play, instead of like, oh, you have to be in this room with me at all, you know, all the time because I don't trust you. Um, and you go down this rabbit hole. There's like all these different kinds of cameras. There's cheap ones. You find out they're like uploading your information to the
Yeah,
internet.
different security models and different
Yeah,
access
and
and
then like different protocols. Where are they, you know, made? They're made in like other countries. You don't know
hmm
what the security is. And so I finally ended up settling on a camera and bought it, and it's beautiful. It
nice.
does like 4K. It's wireless. I love it. And I'm already like, where am I gonna put it? Because now I have to mount it to a
Mm,
wall, and the wire is too short, so now I already need another wire that's long enough to plug it in. And I'm already anticipating like,
sounds like you got your next rabbit hole.
yes, how long is this gonna sit in a box?
Yes. I have something like that also already sitting in the box that we have to try and get installed. So we'll see who gets it done first.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that is our rabbit holes of the week. Well, you know, our topic was ADHD. So how did we get here? Where did we start from, and where did we end up?
Yeah, I think overall I think we did a good job. I think ADHD has a lot, and I suspect we may come back to this topic again in the future, right? So we've kind of written out and documented a few things maybe we'll talk about in the future. But
Oh yeah.
um, I think overall we tried to stay on course. I think we did a relatively good job. We didn't go too far off. There was a few tangents, I feel like, but
Yeah, it's a topic that is the reason why we created our podcast. So it's really easy to talk about, but also not go off a tangent, because it's such a big topic to begin with. There's so many
yeah,
things it impacts in your life. So
it really realizes how connected it is to almost everything that of just our well being and just how we are as a person. You know,
yeah.
which is fascinating, right? So I love
Well,
going into it and
definitely.
digging in.
I was going to say, we definitely, if you've not seen that episode of Malcolm in the Middle, we will find you the YouTube clip of
Yeah,
it, and also the Disruptors film. I believe it's on like Amazon Video or some of those streaming services, I think.
yeah,
Uh,
and yeah, just kind of the takeaway is feel free to share in either comments or just reach out to us, and just share some of your story, right? Like, did you resonate? Just some of these things? Have you seen some of your own examples or even have some great tips and tricks, right?
Yep.
Again, the important thing for us is building a community where many of us are like-minded. How can we learn from each
Yeah.
other, right? As we talked about in our last episode. So, I appreciate you and looking forward to our next session.
Yeah. I appreciate you and everyone who's listening. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.